The final subject I want to talk about is how society and propaganda worked in George Orwell's book 1984 and compared to how society acts today. There are a lot of similar concepts in the book, similar to how love works, described in part 4, but the main focus of today will be these 4 concepts: Big Brother, Doublethink, Newspeak, and Thought Crime. Let's start off with Big Brother. Big Brother is the leader of Oceania, similar to how Joe Biden is the president of the United States today, or Xi Jinping is dictator of China. But what relates Big Brother more to Xi Jinping rather than Joe Biden is that his party uses the slogan, "Big Brother is watching you." This slogan is seen everywhere throughout China, as it is used in most of the propaganda posters lined down every street. What makes Big Brother truly Orwellian is that he might not even exist. This is thought to be the case because nobody has ever seen him make a public presence, but see him almost every day speaking on their telescreens. I think this represents a period in history that we haven't reached yet, but it can be very possible not too far from now. Let's use Joe Biden for example. Joe Biden has had a history with having strokes. If Biden were to have another stroke at his age today, there's a good chance that he wouldn't survive. With that said, with the use of AI, could help cover up the fact that he isn't alive anymore. If the use of very high quality AI were used to cover up the president's passing, and absolutely nobody within the government leaked that the president is dead, and what we were seeing on Twitter were AI videos of the president, then essentially the president is still around as a very much alive political symbol run by the Democratic Party within the White House. With this possibility, Biden would be able to serve a second term without even being alive. Now obviously, there would be a lot of things that would make this impossible, such as participating in re-election, presidential debates, and having to show up to inauguration if he won the election. But in a dictatorship like China, Xi Jinping might actually be able to do this and get away with it. With Xi being 71 years old and the life expectancy in China being 78 years old, Xi statistically has a little under a decade left of governing before he passes away from old age. The CCP could very easily use AI to cover up his passing and use Xi Jinping thought as a party's main philosophy. The Xi being a dictator, he never really needs to make public appearances for any reason. But what the CCP can do is make AI videos and propaganda to make the public believe that Xi is still around and keep public morale high. This would never have been able to be a reality, but with how quickly AI has been developing, real-life Big Brother equivalent could actually exist. And I think something like this would be way too risky for any government to try, but I'm very interested to see how AI gets involved in politics and government in the future. The next thing to look at is the concept of doublethink. Doublethink is a form of hypocrisy pushed by the government to make people believe both a contradicting truth and lie at the same time. In 1984, a big thing that is pushed by the government party is that there is no need for democracy, while at the same time calling themselves the protectors of democracy. This concept is actually very common in politics today. The White House will say that Joe Biden has gotten to the age where he shouldn't be out in public for long periods of time, while also saying that he is the most fit person in the country to be president. While writing the script, Joe Biden has dropped out from running for re-election and has endorsed his vice president, Kamala Harris. This means that the White House lie did not stand, and the truth overcame the entire validity of Biden's re-election efforts. I have a belief that I like to call social Darwinism. Darwinism is the idea created by Charles Darwin that organisms survive if they take full advantage of what's given to them to survive, while other organisms will die out if they do not take advantage. Now just apply that to social cultures. This isn't the same social Darwinism as Herbert Spencer believed, where he used them to justify Nazi-like ideas. This is more of there being a reality that some practices and beliefs help a culture live longer than others without there being conflict or discrimination. But back to simple Darwinism. You are a monkey living on an island. There are two species of monkey on said island. Let's say you are part of a monkey species number 1 and the other species is species number 2. Now let's say the main food source is apples from an apple tree forest. Both species are able to thrive off of the forest because they both love apples. But let's say over time half of the forest died off and was replaced by blueberry bushes. Species number 2 now begins to eat both apples and blueberries because they know that what they have to do to survive, even if the blueberries aren't as good as the apples. But on the other hand, your species number 1, rejects the blueberry bushes and continues to eat only apples. Well, over time, the apple trees go extinct while the blueberry bushes become the new main food source. Due to this, species number 2 accepts reality and was able to thrive because of it. But species number 1, your species, died off because they didn't like the reality. This is exactly how social Darwinism works. There are certain aspects to cultures that keep society alive, while others do more harm than good. Let's say that in American politics there is a left-wing socialist group that does not believe in having children, and a right-wing Christian nationalist group that thinks you should have 5 children. These two cultures are fighting over who should rule society. At first, the left-wing culture rules for a long time because their culture is new and a lot of people switch to new cultures if it sounds convenient. But because they aren't having any children, the difference of population between the left and right are changing significantly. This is because the people on the left aren't having children to pass their culture on to, while the right is having 5 children to pass their culture on to. Some people on the left will notice this and have maybe 1 or 2 children and pass on just their socialist beliefs, while the rest stay stubborn to not having children because they think children are annoying. This rejection of reality is what makes it to where the left's population halves and then stagnates to where the right continues to have rapid growth. This is exactly how I believe truth works, through a form of social Darwinism. I like to think that the newer LGBTQ ideology is something that will probably naturally die out over time due to this. Even the people who disagree with it won't say anything bad about it because there hasn't been enough time yet to see if it has any negative effects. But today, a lot of this newer LGBTQ ideology consists of getting surgeries to look like a different gender. These surgeries are irreversible and can even sometimes make it impossible for you to have children in the future. Pronouns are something that have nothing of value. To normal people, it feels like a bunch of unimportant nonsense that nobody cares to memorize. And drag queens, while at adult-only clubs, can be written off, but bringing children to these clubs or even bringing drag queens to schools is seen as borderline pedophilic and repulsive. Due to this, I think the new LGBTQ culture will get rejected by society and die out, while normal LGBTQ culture such as being gay or bisexual will live on. Newspeak is an interesting concept in the book 1984. Newspeak is essentially just combining words together to make a person's vocabulary smaller with the intention of making them too dumb to make any critical thoughts. For example, the word fantastic would be double plus good, great would be plus good, and acceptance would be belly feel. Society has come up with new words to shorten vocabulary. Examples of this could be hip, rad, cray cray, riz, sus, OMG, and lol. Personally, I don't think these actually have any negative effects on society and are just rather trends. I think this because nobody really says hip, rad, or cray cray anymore. Thought crime is the most interesting concept. Thought crime is a crime of thinking poorly of the government. Thought crime is hard to explain in of itself, so I'm going to go through all the terms used in the book that give a good explanation of how thought crime really works. These terms consist of crime stop, crime think, face crime, and sex crime. First, let's look at crime stop. Crime stop is where a person is thinking negatively about the government, so they intentionally turn themselves in to get re-indoctrinated by the government. This means that thinking Big Brother might not be real would get you sent straight to prison. Face crime is the most absurd crime of them all. This is where you could get jailed for making a face of disapproval. This would be the equivalent of rolling your eyes while a politician says something stupid, and then the next day your home gets raided by the FBI and you have a warrant out for your arrest. And the final crime is sex crime. I don't think anything described this as well as the description on Wikipedia. Sex crime is, quote, a sexual immorality such as fornication, adultery, oral sex, or homosexuality. Can't speak today. Any sex that act that you can read it. I'm having a stroke today, and I don't feel like repeating this over and over again. This means that anything outside of a man getting a woman pregnant would be able to get you sent to jail. Now let's go through all of them and see how much they are used in the real world. I personally don't think Crime Stop is something that happens unless you are literally in a cult. The closest I've seen to this is reading posts where people completely change their ideologies and then make a long post on Twitter apologizing for voting for a certain candidate in their previous election. While I don't think this is something crazy, I do think it is a bit silly to apologize for voting for someone because the top two candidates usually aren't really that bad. While crime think literally is not possible in the United States, speaking out against the government in countries like China, North Korea, Russia, and maybe Iran could get you jailed. But in the West, if you criticize a politician on the internet, you will most likely get comments under your post calling you a traitor to America and a threat to democracy. And this doesn't matter who you criticize because the far left and far right pretty much say the exact same thing when you criticize their favorite politician. Face crime really doesn't have any sort of reality. Making a face of disapproval of Kim Jong-un in North Korea could get you jailed, but it's even a stretch to say that this might happen in Russia or China. The only real version of face crime is when you make the "you're a moron" face when a Karen complains to you that you put an extra grain of salt on her mayonnaise sandwich, and the face you make gets her even more riled up. The only way for sex crime to exist is if there's a state like Israel, but ruled by the most hardcore, most strict Jews humanity has ever seen. I say this because people who believe in Judaism tend to be a bit more strict than Christians about sex. A lot of self-proclaimed Christians today even come out and support the LGBTQ community. But the closest thing to sex crime is in reality a bunch of dumb people on the internet complaining about gay people, or religious fanatics complaining about how people have sex for pleasure rather than procreation. Overall, thought crime today is just a bunch of uptight people on the internet that can't fathom that someone thinks differently than they do. So how can we prevent the world from falling into an Orwellian state? There are a few steps that can be followed to ensure that Orwell's book never becomes a reality. Step 1. Prevent monopolies. If we continue to allow social media companies to hold monopolies over speech, then what is it to say that the CEO running these companies don't become oligarchs? Giving social media companies this much power over speech is very dangerous. The best solution to this is to diversify your social media consumption between multiple social medias. Step 2. Learn history. Nothing combats government propaganda like having a strong knowledge in history. You can do this by owning and reading a small library of history books. One thing I will never accept is that Ukraine is a great country. Even though I really do not like Russia, it doesn't mean I should lie to myself about what Ukraine's government is actually like. Transparency International ranks Ukraine 36 out of 100 on a corruption scale, 0 meaning very corrupt and 100 meaning not corrupt at all. They also gave Russia a score of 26 and the United States a score of 69. While I support Ukraine over Russia, I won't excuse that both governments are terrible governments. Step 3. Don't be ignorant and stubborn. You have a belief about something, make sure you don't have another belief that contradicts that belief. If you have two beliefs that contradict, step back and rethink what you truly believe. Also, make sure you do a lot of research into the topic before you form a belief, because the last thing you want to do is believe a lie and fall into the trap of a dying culture. What the message I'm trying to send is this: base your opinions off of facts, and don't think how someone, especially the government, tells you how to think. If you build factual beliefs, then you will learn the truth. And if you know the truth, then you'll be able to survive social Darwinism. I want to thank you for watching this episode. If you think I got something wrong, let me know in the comments. If you want me to look into a specific topic, also let me know in the comments. Subscribe if you enjoy this kind of long-form content. Subscribe to my Clips channel if you prefer to watch shorter segments of this podcast. And finally, subscribe to my Shorts channel if you only want to hear my most informative quotes. Links to all my channels are in the description, and links to all my sources are also in the description. The next podcast will be about the book Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, so stay tuned for that. Anyways, I'll see you next time.